Elicia Azali, Kellogg alumni, fellow Kellogg alumni, the chief marketing officer currently at Beazer Homes, and just an incredible career, incredible leader. Really honored that you're on the Tell Me More podcast. We're exploring wisdom and wonder with exceptional leaders, and you're an exceptional leader and human. But I like to start these conversations just letting you give all of us kind of an overview, both of your journey, and it's not just a read through, right? The LinkedIn, it's also just what's important to you. What do you want us to know about your journey and about you?
First off, thank you, Billy. It's great to be here with you today, and congrats on this podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be one of your first guests and just to have a good conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's about storytelling and listening and learning from one another. So super excited to be here together. Just by introduction, I am Chief Marketing Officer at Beazer Homes. I've been doing marketing for my entire career. So I like to describe myself as a person who loves business but likes to grow them through brands. And I started my career at Procter and Gamble, so this idea that brands is the way that customers connect with the business and to me are a sort of non-negotiable for business growth despite the category. And I've spent my career in categories that are really important, but not super sexy. So at Procter, I worked on Charmin. Shout out to Charmin marketers if you're out there.
Hey, Charmin's important.
It's a must-have.
Yeah.
It's a must-have, right? I spent some time on Bounty as well, and spent some time in the financial services and insurance industry, Nationwide, American Family, The General, and now at Beazer Homes, which is a national publicly traded home builder. And so, and for different reasons, you might think that brand has a different role, and I just believe that the voice of the customer, the power and the consistency of brand are must-haves in building trust and relationship with consumers that to me ultimately drives growth.
Yeah. I love
I'm
that.
the proud mother of four. I always
Mother of
include that in.
four.
Yes, and they're all boys.
Oh my goodness. How do you do it all?
Yeah, all they're my heart. But that's definitely influences how I lead my purpose, and I'm sure we'll spend some time talking about that.
Well, I want actually there's so many things to dive into out of all that. I'm taking notes here. I'm looking down at my yellow pad, but the four boys influences how you lead. How so?
You know, when I first became a mother, I remember being super overwhelmed, and because it's life changing. But over time, you realize it's a forcing mechanism for prioritization because you literally don't have time to do everything, and you don't have to take too much time to realize that. Like it smacks you in the face very quickly, and so as a leader, it again really puts you in a place to say, what are the biggest, most important levers to pull while I'm here in this, at work in this capacity to drive the outcomes I'm looking for. The second thing, Billy, is it really builds your empathy for what people might have going on in their lives. And at the beginning of my career, and it's really focused on outcomes and building the business and that sort of thing. And I would say becoming a parent helped me frankly be a better leader because I was more empathetic for the human part of it, right? For the things that you don't see when people show up to work every day, because that was sort of no longer something I could just leave behind. It was a part of my identity that I wanted to bring forward.
Yeah, and as a leader of a large team, and you've done that for a while, you said, what do people have going on in their lives? There probably are some leaders who don't care what their people have going on in their lives. They just want the metrics, achieved or else. How have you found that caring about that has actually driven, better achievement of the goals at work?
I worked for an individual a few years ago who never prioritized personal things. Never, ever, ever. And there was one instance where they said, I've got to take my son to this thing. And in front of a room of other leaders said, I don't think that's like a good use of my time, but like, I'm just telling you that. And so it was very clear that the tenor and the energy in the room was like, we've always felt that this was the priority, but to put it into words, it creates this dynamic where I think it doesn't foster trust. It doesn't foster relationship. And at the end of the day, you see me here, but there's 100 people that are working every day to try to make my the vision of this team happen. And so if I believe that if you don't kind of lead with the humanity, you're going to lose you can't be a leader if you don't have followers, and people won't follow someone that I don't think has a heart or the care that's required to do the work.
Yeah, we know the phrase genuine followership, or it's a phrase I know of, genuine followership, and I think that's what you're hitting on, and let's just dig one level deeper into that. When I create genuine followership versus when I don't, what are the reasons why I should, and what are the reasons why some people don't?
The most valuable sort of thing I can bring to the table as a leader is a spirit of trust, because I don't see everything in every part of the business. And if I don't create an environment where people feel comfortable saying, hey, there's this thing going on over here that you might not have heard about. I know you asked us to do this a certain way, but I really think the other way is it's like this. To build trust, you have to have relationship. You have to show that you care. You have to kind of reciprocate what you expect. And so for me, it really does end up in the long haul connecting back to outcomes, because you'll get a team that is going to come to you and be honest and be real and authentic and have your back and have the outcomes of the business kind of front and center. And I think that's important.
Yeah, so trust unlocks something, and I guess you just named, what it does unlock, and it's interesting for this part of our conversation, we started with your 4 boys, and you said they've influenced how you lead. A couple things you said is they're a forcing mechanism for prioritization, which I think we all immediately get, right? You can't do everything with 4 boys and a big career and all these things. So you have to decide the most important levers to pull, but then also humanity, tr people's lives really matter. How do you balance the prioritization of levers to pull? We have to get this done. Nope. There's 100 things we can't do, and there's 4 we're going to do really well, while also building that trust and considering people's humanity and slowing down enough to care, to see people as humans and care.
I think it comes back to clarity on your why and your purpose. And
Tell me more.
that's something for me that's evolved over my career. And I would say early on, during undergraduate at the Ohio State University, I
The
have to,
Ohio
I know,
State.
as well as my time at Procter and Gamble. I have pretty humble beginnings. I didn't necessarily miss meals, but like I saw my parents struggle. I know what that feels like to like go without. And I'll be honest, my first few years in my career, Billy, were about, I didn't want to live that way. And so my why for, call it 8 years was, when I go to work, I want to maximize my outcome. And listen, I don't mean to offend people, but that's, if you live that way, it's easy to get motivated by what you don't have, and that was clear for me. I knew I couldn't afford college. I knew I had to get a scholarship. I worked my tail off to make sure I could do that. I knew I needed a good job because there was no one there. So for me, that clarity of my why, I need to maximize my outcomes through the breadth of experiences, was a clear focus for me. My why has evolved significantly. And I would say more of the purpose that I have now is being able to create and share space for others. And one of my favorite quotes is by Toni Morrison. And she says, when you get these careers that you've so brilliantly trained for, remember that if you have freedom, your job is to free someone else.
Ooh, that's
Yeah, that
good.
when you into, some level of success and you've accomplished something, it's not the measure of success is not just continuing to do that on your own, but to create capacity for others to come along with you. And so, that is more of what, you know, how I think about success, or how I think about, purpose, and, um, you know, kind of back to how I lead as well.
Oh my goodness, wow. How long has it been? 10 minutes? This is like gold after gold after gold. Okay. So if you have freedom, your job is to free someone else. This is a little rhetorical, but I'd love to hear your answer on it. Do I need to get to a certain level in order to start helping free other people? Do I need to achieve my freedom first? Or can any of us be doing that? Is it a state of mind? Is it a title? Because there is an implied, and I don't think it's wrong. You're at you've achieved a very high level. That does give you more influence and power and, to have more impact. But how do all of us, apply that to our lives? And do some of us need to get to a certain level before we can?
I think it comes back to the amount of risk, you can take or you have taken. And it is a little less risky for me to raise my hand if I see something and have the courage to do so. But in the same breath, everyone's always watching. And so I remembered a time I was still an executive, but a little more junior in my career. I happened to wear my hair in braids just because I was going on vacation, right? Like there's no sort of moment or thing I was trying to signal. And I was presenting at the company town hall. And just again, very matter of fact, I knew I had to present. I knew that I needed to leave for the beach the next day. And so therefore, I'm in braids in the company town hall. Billy, I had at least, I'll say 7 to 10 people, either via text message or email or some sort of correspondence say, I didn't know that I could do that. I didn't know that, at the leadership level, wearing, that natural hairstyle was acceptable at this company. So seeing you do that, I feel like I have permission to now do that in my own space. And, I'm talking about very senior leaders all the way
Yeah.
down to junior. People are always sort of looking for,
Permission.
permission. And so that's
Permission
just,
to be who they are.
yeah.
Wow, that's a powerful story. How does someone measure whether or not they are actively using their influence, no matter how small or big it is, to free others? Is it because they get text messages, or what would you say if I'm out there listening and saying, I want to do what Alicia does? How do I know if I'm even doing it or doing it well?
That's interesting. I do think it comes back to people, and maybe it's not a text message, but um, when you have connection with someone, like that, they're going to go out of their way to sort of you know make that obvious. And so again, whether that's a someone walking down the hallway or a LinkedIn connection, you'd be surprised by the little things that you know I might take for granted. Even the fact of me mentioning that I have children is something that people say, "Wow, I'm just glad you owned it because now I feel like I can leave at 5:30. I'm going to come back online." The humanity of it, I think, is sort of the measure, making those connections, letting people be themselves. And I promised it's sort of an investment because they'll want to do more for you or for the project or whatever it is when they feel like that connection is there.
That's so good. I think we're back to trust. Trust has the power to unlock. And it sounds like, and I think we hear this from Brene Brown and others, but that you showing your humanity, therefore your authenticity, your vulnerability is unlocking the trust. And the trust is unlocking people to feel probably safe, seen, heard, and therefore they can show up at their best. And so,
Right.
what the trickle down effect is of you being able to show up in your freedom is that you give others freedom to be their very best selves, and therefore you have a whole team of imagine what it would be like to have 500 people or however many people it is, all showing up as their best self.
Yeah. And I in the role or the capacity of chief marketing officer, it's it's often the voice of the customer in the rooms that I sit in that's super important too, right? It's not every recommendation that I bring forward is, yep, that sounds great, Alicia. But having the courage to anchor it back into again, it's still a humanity piece, but from a business perspective, my I take a lot of pride in spending time with our customers, whether that be in person or through data or, some feedback that they give us in our call centers or whatever it is, representing their voice, having the courage to come up with maybe a different way to think about a solution based on, you know, being in touch with what our people say, our customers say, is also it's a sometimes you have to be courageous even in that to challenge what how we've been operating. And again, the voice of customer is also a way to do that.
Yeah. So we had Steve Robinson, who was the original marketing department. He was the first guy and also the original chief marketing officer for Chick-fil-A. He was there for 35 years and oversaw them joining college football, the cow campaign, all of that. And he talked in a very similar vein that you're talking, that we grow businesses through brands, we build brands, and that we learn both in terms of our product, innovating product, as well as building kind of who we are and our brand through the voice of the customer. I think great companies do a lot of listening. So, will you talk about in your career where you are at currently, if you want to talk specifics or just broadly, what it means to grow a business through brands, through a brand? I mean, start us off with how would you define what a brand is?
Yeah, so we can start with how I think about brand, which is if nobody's in the room and the company name comes up, what do people say back? What does it stand for? How does it make someone feel? What does it look like? And again, that doesn't mean that you're spending $1 billion in advertising every year. Every time a customer interacts with you is a chance for your brand to show up, whether that's in my industry, walking through a model home or being on the phone with someone, or you're on the website exploring what's possible. Every experience is a representation of your brand. And so it's really important to get the consistency and really all of those core tenets of a brand defined sort of up front across the customer journey. And so in my current capacity, that was a big part of the work that we did is again, get clear on your why. Like, why do we exist? What are we here for? What do we do differently relative to our competitors? You not have to know who is most delighted by that. Who can we grow with? And I'm sure Steve from Chick-fil-A spent a lot of time just connecting with customers and getting really crisp on what are their unmet needs? What are the problems that kind of keep them up that night relative to the industry, and what's the brand's role in solving those things? And there's sort of the at the heart of it, the message, the product, the like, what do we do, and how can we communicate? How can we interact again across all customer touch points to help bring that connection, that yep, I see you moment every step of the way.
You're leading marketing, and the first question is, why do we exist when you come into these different roles? Is there pushback from, I mean, you're marketing, right? You're not everything. You're not the CEO. And why do we exist? You think would be at the highest level, for the entire ELT to have a conversation about. So are you coming in saying, hey, do you guys know why we exist? If you do, great, I can run with that. Or is it a lot of times having to say, um, we have to have this discussion, and you think we've had it, but we haven't gone deep enough before.
Yeah, uh, I would say it's walking a fine line. And the analogy that I use with my current CEO is, it's like when you're new to an organization, this is something that you've created and the executive leadership team has created for years without me. And so to have the privilege to be able to care for and nurture, you know, the identity of the organization is a privilege. So I think you have to out the gate acknowledge um, the intensity or the significance of the work, but it does require a lot of honest conversation, and I would say dialogue with let's align on what the work is before we get after it. And so we actually asked our employees. I believe brand building kind of starts within. Everyone on the inside needs to be as convicted or more than what you expect your customers to be. It's hard to compel someone to buy from you if the people who work don't truly believe. And so we started with getting some insight from our employees and asking them, why do we exist, or what's our point of difference, and what do we do better than everyone else, or what is it like to work with us. And in some places it was highly consistent, and in other places it was an opportunity to really sharpen and help create that through line of the story we were trying to tell about our brand.
And I love that it starts within. I think there's probably a lot of marketers that might start without, or even just entrepreneurs say, what does the market want? Right? This feels a little classic Steve Jobs. They don't know that they need a phone with no buttons on it. So I'm going to create it. When you talk about starting within and you talk about this why, I know it's partly a strategy. It's just good strategy, but you also seem to be passionate about it, or at least believe it deeply if you don't want to use that word. Where did that come from? How did that get developed in you?
I think it's this idea that no one person can do anything alone. The idea of community, or village, if you will. And so it doesn't matter how compelled I am to do a thing, if I don't have others that say, yeah, I agree with where you're going, and that makes sense to me, because at the end of the day, you're exactly right. It's part marketing strategy, but it is really moving your organization in a direction. And if that direction is not clear, you're gonna get people to drift away from where that North Star is. And so a lot of it is because no one person can lead without the support of others. I found that starting from within just helps create the momentum, the inertia, the desire to, kind of take the brand or the business in places that otherwise wouldn't go as far, as fast, or as deep.
Yeah, what I've heard this is a little bit from it's definitely from Steve in our conversation, but other senior leaders is if you start on this side of the value chain, let's call it, with the tactical, let's be more efficient, let's do it tactically better, let's improve our systems, whatever. And then maybe you say, oh, let's improve our products. And then maybe it's our overall strategy. If you start over here, you might grow by addition. But if you start over there on the left side with the who are we, which you're calling your why, right? And then in marketing language, you're going to say, who do we serve? And I might say, who are we, right? That's our why. Then it seems to drive an exponential growth, a multiplication as opposed to addition. And it seems like there's something that happens when, let's just say, there's 10,000 people in the organization. If you improve tactically, right, they're still not more deeply connected as a single organization, organism, whatever you want to call it, but they're just doing things maybe more efficiently on the ground where they're at. If you add product, then there's just another product to sell. They might like it a little bit better and customer might like it a little bit better. But if you start with the who, there seems to be this unseen connection that brings everybody together into this almost higher mind, this one purpose, this one connection, this one belief. And it's almost feels like a superhero story, but by our powers combined, we can do
Yeah.
exponentially more than we could by ourselves. But I'm trying to kind of wrap my mind around that idea and why companies miss out so often on unlock. I mean, I think it's hard work,
Yeah.
that exponential growth they could get if they go back to the what I call who, what you're calling why.
It's a flywheel effect.
Well said.
I'll give you a recent example. We went on this journey. We got clear on, our purpose and our customers and our message strategy and across the board. And people are bought in and excited, et cetera. And of course, we've got business metrics that are defining how we think about and measure success. But to this conversation and this flywheel effect, one one of the things I'll look for is other ideas that are brought to me that are better, bigger, and more higher order in service of this North Star than I would have come up on by myself. And so that's why you do it, is because it really sort of unlocks the thinking of an organization when when you bring them along the journey and they're sort of in their world and in their area of expertise, and then it finally clicks. then they're able to come back and say, wow, I know that's where we're headed. Did we think about this? And you're like, man, I didn't think about it, but gosh, that's a great idea. That's a better idea than I would have thought of if I just kind of went along by myself. And now that you understand where we're headed and where we're going, now you as an expert in that space can come up with an idea that's is, again, more impactful, more measurable, more and I think that, again, that's how you know that people have that's the flywheel effect. It's a 1 plus 1 equal 3 sort of moment.
Yeah, that exponential, that multiplication. I am not a marketer. We both went to a marketing school. I'm not a marketer, but every time I have a conversation, whether it was with Manolo Arroyo, Coca-Cola's global CMO, with Molly Batten, CMO at Home Depot, with Steve, with you, I love marketers because, or at least marketers who it seems like do it the way you guys do it, because you believe that that the collective voice of people really matters. And a lot of the work I do outside of this podcast, I think is helping CFOs, COOs, CTOs, CEOs believe that as well about the people at every level in their organization. This podcast is about exploring wisdom and wonder with exceptional leaders. In my work, I talk about extracting and leveraging the wisdom and wonder within your organization. I'm curious, just one more dig and then we can move to another topic, but about people. When
Mhm.
you hear wisdom and wonder, and I've kind of used those words because it's a little bit of a contrast. It's not anti technology or AI or knowledge, but it's a contrast to AI can do so much for us. At the end of the day, it's probably going to peak out at knowledge and functionality and on my continuum of who, which is your why, where, which is strategy, and how, which is tactical, it's going to be highly how, tactical, influence the where, allow us to, you know, calculate data, do analysis, all that kind of stuff. But it probably can't start touching the who we are, right? Our why, our purpose, our deep meaning, our deep connection, or at that high strategic level. So I'm just curious what wonder, wisdom mean to you, what the future looks like to you when it comes to where AI fits and where humans fit. This is like the big question, right? It's really unfair. You're like, I don't know,
Yeah,
Billy, who knows? But what are
yeah.
your current thoughts on it?
When I was in the insurance industry years ago, I remember, in the early 2000s, everyone was saying how when the direct business was launched, that agents were going away. No one was going to go to an insurance agent because you could get all of that, value from, the internet basically, or a phone call. And I mean, tons of conversation about that. And over time, certainly we've seen more business go to the direct channels. But at the end of the day, people want to connect with people for experiences that are complex or serious or, where they feel like they lack clarity and need, and I really believe that human led, digital enabled interactions, helping humans deliver more better experiences through the power of AI or the power of technology. To me, that's sort of that's where we're headed. Now, to be sure, that doesn't mean that there aren't parts of your experience that aren't going to be completely digital, because we all can relate to being on the phone and wanting to talk to a human and pressing buttons and the whole thing. So don't hear me the wrong way. There's absolutely a role within customer experience where they will be all digitized, and that makes sense. And for the moments that matter the most, humans, I believe, will want to be in a connection with a human that is powered by, fueled by, the intelligence of technology. That's where I place my bet.
Yeah, I love that. I have a framework of kind of 4 approaches to implementing AI or approaching AI in an organization, and the one I say to land on is the H with the little AI next to it, which is AI plays a critical role. You've got to win at it, but it should all be about, as long as we've still got humans around, unlocking the full human potential. So that's what I hear you saying. I heard you say 3 words that you might have landed on. Maybe you already had it. Maybe you already knew this as a framework, or maybe you just gave us a framework out of nowhere, which would be great. But as it comes to what are humans going, what do they want now? What are they going to continue to want that maybe technology can't give them? Three words I heard were connect to experiences, especially when it's complex. Can you say more about that? Tell us more.
In any industry, there are parts of the experience that are by nature very transactional. Making a payment, maybe there's a quick warranty claim or whatever it is. Again, it sort of depends on the industry. There are bigger decisions in most industries that require a back and forth, a bit of a dialogue. There's trade-offs, there's nuances, there's discovery. And I think those are where brands stand out. And I think experience stands out. And often those are the ones that are most suited for humans to lead. And so kind of in home building, and to be sure, there are other brands that make different choices. You know, um, how you connect in our welcome center, the relationship or the voice or tone of voice on the phone, what our website looks like, like all of these pieces and parts really come together to create, kind of back to the question around brand, they all add up to defining kind of who the company is and who they're for. And I think there are moments where that digital experience is a must have. And then there's times where you want to talk to somebody. You want to feel like somebody gets me and I'm heard and that company has my back. And those are the experiences or parts of the experience where humans will.
Yeah, I love that. Let's shift gears and let me ask you about who and what experiences or what people in your past have most influenced, or at least some of them. I'm sure you can't name everybody who you've become leader.
Yeah, I always shout out my mom. She will expect this probably because it's always my answer because I believe it. My mom had children very young. Again, we grew up in a small town in Northeast Ohio. Shout out to Overland, Ohio. And I graduated from Ohio State before she did. But one of my most vivid memories growing up is her studying for her degree. So, there were times where we would come home, and it took her 10 years, Billy, to get her undergraduate degree.
Go mom.
Go mom, right? And she had, kids, right? And so working super hard. My mom in 2020 graduated with her PhD. She is a doctor now,
Go mom.
currently is in Africa helping some universities build up their practice around dealing with trauma and social work and therapy. She goes there 2 or 3 times a year. And it's just a story of
Oh my goodness.
you get to write your own book. And, where you're planted is not necessarily where you'll go. And just the courage to not let that, whatever current situation you're in, define where you'll ultimately end up. And she used to always talk about stick to itiveness, which I'm not even sure is a word, but
If
sort of
she
the
said it,
audacity.
it is.
That's right. The audacity to just always kind of move forward, put one foot in front of the other, and in pursuit of whatever that goal is. And for sure, my mom.
For sure your mom. Now you're your mom for me. Like we all want to be adopted. You told us things about your mom that are incredibly impressive in terms of what she's done, and you've painted a picture where our brains can immediately say, "Wow," from there to there. And frankly, it doesn't matter where from to get to where she is now. Like how not many have done that, no matter where they started. But will you give us a few? I mean, you said the stick to it. Will you give us a few other, kind of lessons along the way? So maybe you're in high school, maybe you're in college, maybe you're earlier in career, and maybe something was challenging. You're running into a roadblock. You pick up the phone, you talk to mom, or you're at home and you talk to mom, and she says something that we can hold on to in addition to the stick to itiveness.
Yeah, she is very warm and matter of fact, but again, has clarity, in her where she's going. And is unflappable around what circumstances might, take a step back here or there to get her there. You know, there are tons of things that could have discouraged her from continuing to, advance, whether that be educationally or just, whatever her career aspirations were. Literally, there's everything imaginable kind of came her way, and she still found the strength and the courage to center back I think a lot of it is her faith for sure, but she just never gave up. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but the idea of not settling and seeing what's possible. She also used to keep quotes on our mirror. I remember growing up, just a regular old mirror, and she would use post-it notes and post them. And one was to dream the impossible dream, and that's just this idea that you can do whatever you want to do, and I got to witness that happen with her. The idea of manifestation, and again, even in those little moments, the post-it notes on the mirror is a big memory that I have.
So do you believe that you can do anything, that anything is possible for your life? Whatever vision or dream you have is accomplishable for you.
I do, I
That's
do.
pretty powerful.
Yeah.
You
um,
go ahead.
and it kind of connects back to the prioritization conversation. You might not be able to have it all at the same time, but I think you can have it all, whatever that means to you. Um, but I would also caution, not at the expense of, you've got to keep yourself, your personal situation in mind as well. But I think to the extent you're clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you, anyone has the capacity to do that.
So I heard you say about your mom, it's the resilience, it's the stick to itiveness, it's seeing what's possible, clarity. One one of them though that I want to dig into is the unflappable. Because what that sounds like to me is, and you kind of talked about this, is it sounded like no matter what people might say, no matter expectations, no matter kind of judgments, maybe you come across somebody that, because there are people out there like this who just aren't kind, that they try to be a roadblock. Uh, it sounds like it did not deter her. What was it about her that enabled her to be that way? And do you think you're now living in the same way?
I would say I can't speak to her lived experiences of like what kind of created this belief that there'll be setbacks, but you still move forward. Again, my guess is she would say her faith is a large part of that. But I do think, and one thing I talk about with with my other CMO friends or even my children, is this idea you really do have to have the courage to move forward. The idea that you can't, being clear on your why helps a lot, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. Because if I know my purpose and why I'm here and what I'm trying to accomplish, it just allows for a level of focus that ambiguity can distract you from. And so that's a lot of how I spend my time, and making sure I'm working in service of that, in that moment, what I believe to be, why I'm here, and also allowing yourself to pivot on what it is. Again, I talked about earlier in my career, eh, I was really focused on being financially stable. That was super important to me. And I was like, I'm getting after that thing. I think Scott Galloway talks about don't follow your dreams, like follow what you're good at. And I didn't have those words, back then, but I'm going to follow this thing that can help me be productive. Again, then you kind of get a little further on and you say, wow, I can be even more productive to the extent that I'm helping other people, I'm bringing people along, and not getting discouraged when setbacks occur.
I actually like that. I can see follow what you're good at can unlock or enable your dreams, and to follow what you're good at, and maybe my just faith background could be called, maybe just other people's backgrounds too, calling, what I was made for, whatever it might be. Stop kind of resisting. Some people do. I know I have at times. That comes naturally. I want to do that thing because other people are doing it, or just because it's hard, or whatever it might be. No, that, like, go follow that energy flow or whatever you want to call it, and do the thing that you were put here on this earth to do exceptionally well. That will then enable you to go serve people because,
Right.
you've leveled up. It'll enable your dreams because probably people are paying you well for it, or, your dreams don't just have to cost money, but that, that kind of stuff. Is that how you think about follow what you're good at?
Absolutely. I mean, you are super personable and relatable, and then you start this podcast, right? You're putting your energy into something that is maybe you don't know exactly where it'll take you, but gosh, it really centers you on something that you get joy from, that allows you to do something that enables connection. And like that's exactly it. It's sort of having the courage to be true to who you are and create the time and space for putting that, sort of prioritizing that. And so absolutely, but again, it kind of that honest reflection, or that purpose part of the conversation, I think is a key part of it, because if you're unclear on that, you might not kind of get to the next question was, well, what am I going to do about it?
I love that. So, who am I? Then what do I go do about it? But I first of all, I have to have the courage uh, to go find out who I am in a world that can be very distracting with social media and all the other thing, and the climbing the ladder or whatever it might be. Wait, before you keep climbing the ladder, everybody out there, can you answer the question, who am I? Whether you use a framework like in Good to Great, the hedgehog concept, or the Japanese ikigai, or whatever else, what are your components of who you are? And have you done the deep work to really understand? It sounds like your mom and you deeply understood who she was, and therefore she knew what she wanted to go do. And then, as you've talked about a few times, you have to have the courage to be true to who you are. And you do that by taking the courageous actions, which, by the way, thank you. I feel very seen. Um, no wonder you're a great leader. I now will go do 100 podcasts because Elicia, yeah, has said to do it. But that's great. Find your ikigai and follow your ikigai. And if we want to go back to business, what you do when you come into an organization is you help the organization find. I'm going back and forth between the ikigai and the hedgehog. I'm using them interchangeably, but Jim Collins used the three circles of the hedgehog, right, to say not just about an individual. He said it about companies, right? That companies who
Yep,
are great know their hedgehog. And it
yep,
sounds like what you do when you come in, and it doesn't matter if you're in marketing. I think if you were the CFO, if you were the whatever, you'd say, guys, I can't do my team cannot do our job well, whoever we are, if we are not 100% clear across all our people, not just at the ELT, what our hedgehog is. And then that will define what we courageously go after. And I believe when we go courageously after the things that come from our hedgehog, we're going to do great things.
mhm. I think one of the most important skills of a leader is being able to listen, but also ask the right questions. And they go together, right? To the extent you're listening to your team, you're absorbing all the information, but being able to translate that into questions that then enable and empower other people to say, "Oh, why hadn't I thought about it like that? That, you know, we should do something about that." I see why it is important for us. I've just been doing this thing over and over again, but I never took a step back to say, "Well, why am why am I doing it?" And again, then you can kind of put the power in other people's hands to take ownership. And I just think people move further faster when they feel that shared accountability.
When you get to the end of your career, many decades, but when you get to the end of your career and you look back, what is most important, or you can say a couple things if you can't just pick one, for people to say about the impact that you made?
I hope that people feel like I cared, and that having worked together made them a better leader, marketer, and team member. I hope they all have an experience where they say, "Man, I felt like she had my back," but also I help an experience where we did some work that we're super proud of that moved the needle.
When you think about and the word integrated in an integrated life, right? And not thinking about life in buckets, right? Oh, my career's over here, my family's over there, and maybe I have my faith, and maybe I have my hobbies, and I have my friends and my family. But when you think about an integrated life, using the language that we're currently using, if you have a personal hedgehog or personal understanding of who you are, it's showing up as the same who in all those
Mhm.
spaces. How do you live that integrated life?
I'm just barely. No, just kidding.
I love it.
Just just
I love it.
just
Let's
barely
be
making it
real.
every day is the actual answer, but truly, trying to be as present in the actual moment that I'm in. If you ask me what I'm doing on Friday, I really don't know. I've got a calendar and a system, and, my husband's gonna tell me, like, I have all the things to do it, but it's like I wake up in the morning, I say, "Thank you, I'm glad I'm here, another day," and then I'm like, "Okay, let's get after it," and I try to just kind of embrace every moment as the moment that I'm in, and that comes with trade-offs when I'm, here at work, present and doing my thing. I'm probably absent in some other places in my life, and then when I choose to prioritize that part, I'm probably absent at work, and it's accepting that that is the integrated life that, I chose, but truly just trying to be honor the moment that I'm in.
And I would guess that whether you're at home or you're at work or you're if you go to a church or a place of worship or you're in your community or your friends, people would say, she's the same Alicia in each place. We're not getting a different Alicia. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, there's levels to it, but it's really hard to manage multiple different versions of this is sort of all what you see is what you get.
And do you think when you can figure out who you are and you can show up as that consistently across all your mediums because it's it's not dependent on the environment to define you. You're not a thermometer, you're a thermostat, right? Is that powerful?
I think it comes back to that the idea of kind of the freedom that comes with being yourself, and adding value where where you can. And so to me, it's valuable because not only does it feel better, but I think it allows other people to say, I can have the courage to speak up on behalf of this customer problem. I can have courage to say maybe there's a conflict that I can meet, and I think it builds trust. Again, at the end of the day, this is not to get too philosophical, but we're kind of going there. That every day is a gift, and to the extent that we're all living in our purpose, I think we're well, and even that is a bit of a privilege. I think back to when I was, a child growing up, I would have never thought I had the capacity to think as big or dream as big. And so, again, creating that space for others to feel and do and breathe that way, I think is a cup.
Well, here's what I'll say as we land the plane. This conversation, both what you said and your presence, your countenance are very inspiring to me. I think they is imbue a word? I don't know. But uh, I think they kind of transmit, right? A level of belief, right? Like I hear your story, I hear your mom's story, not just because it overcame a lot, but but again because of how you present it. That matter of factness that you say your mom has, I feel like you have. There's a lot of, and you know what you said your mom was warm and matter of fact. What a combination, right? Usually you would go, oh, that person's warm. Oh, but that person's matter of fact. But if you bring together, I can trust you, but you're going to be real with me. And also, I can trust them because they're so steady. They see where to go. They're going there. I want to follow that person. I want to learn from that person. I want to become like that person. That's what came across to me in this conversation. So I would actually wrap it up by saying, I'll give you the final word. You started us with, you've experienced what freedom is like. You've gained some freedom. And so you want to go give freedom to others. I would thank you for giving me some freedom, for setting me just a little bit more free in this hour. And what greater gift could you give people? So thank you, Alicia.
Oh my gosh, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for your podcast and the impact that you make on other people's. It's an honor to be here with you this morning.
Thanks for being here.